Massolit Bookstore. Thank you all for coming, despite the weather. And I'm especially pleased to welcome Chris Tanowski, Massolit, and to Poland actually, because this is his first time in Poland. And it's a special occasion because he is an American of Polish heritage, his father. And so this is also a visit for his father, who's not alive anymore. Chris Tanowski is based in Phoenix, Arizona. He's written over 50 different plays and mainly produced and performed them in living rooms and other unusual spaces, although sometimes in theaters as well. He has been a part of a project called the Theater My Basement Theater Project, which is very apropos given his vision for theater. And also, currently he's working on something called the Howl Theater Project, again based in Phoenix, Arizona. He has performed, his works have been performed in different cities throughout the States as well as in Europe, including Minneapolis, Los Angeles, New York, Dublin, Vienna, Berlin, and now of course in Krakow. And again, it's a special pleasure for me to welcome Chris because I was introduced to him through a mutual friend of ours. And she told me that, you know, it's a big deal in experimental theater, so please let's give a warm round of applause for Chris.
Gosh, thank you so much, and thanks you all for coming. So I'm going to show you some stuff, and I'm going to do a little performance thing. Before that, though, I'll talk a little bit because it seems really important that I say something. But first, I want to thank Lynn very much for having me here at Massolit Books, and Cuba for the coffee too. And I want to thank you all for just showing me such warm Polish expatriate hospitality. So this is my first time in Poland, and the reason that I was coming here to begin with is my dad died a little less than 2 years ago, and I had some of his ashes, and I made a promise to him that I would sprinkle some of them in Krakow, where a lot of the Danowskis are or were. So that's what brought me here, and he always talked. I mean, he never had a chance to visit here, so it's really kind of overwhelming to be here right now. And he always talked about like the family history, and apparently one of the reasons why that family emigrated to the United States was because someone murdered somebody. And that's like, I don't know all the details of it, but just in case, I want to say on behalf of the Danowski family, and the Chervinskis, and the Mayers, and the Rakoleviches, and the Pokorskas, the Wolnitskis, and the Datkas, I'm very sorry about that. I don't know all the details though. And so, yeah, so anyway, and so I wanted to tell you a little story about karmic payback, maybe, something that happened to me in Berlin before I came here. I was there for a month. I like to tell stories. So, okay, so I was waiting in the subway, the metro, review on one night. It was about 12:30, and there's a bunch of people, and everyone's kind of like coming back from parties and things. And I'm standing there with my hands in my pockets, and these two policemen came down, and they tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Get your hands out of your pockets." I was like, "Okay, sure." And they're like, "Do you have any weapons in your backpack?" I said, "No weapons." And then one of the cops says, "Well, you are being charged with a crime," which was news to me. Okay, well, he said, "We have a picture of you on video surveillance, and a man says that you punched him in the face, so you have to come with us and give me your ID." So all this was like alarming, you know. This hadn't happened before, you know, and I haven't punched anyone in a really, really long time. So we walked up the stairs, and outside the station there was a big police van with the lights going, and the police van was waiting for me, which was another new thing. So I get in the back of the van, and there's like all these other cops there, and they drive me a ways away, and they take me to this dark corner, and there are a couple of cops and this guy, and they bring the guy over to look inside the van to look at me, and you know, I'm really hoping, because it could go either way, and so he looks at me and he goes, which I took as a really good sign. So the cop went out and talked to them for a while, and he came back in and he said, okay, so here's what's happening. The man is Polish, and he doesn't speak English or German, but we have a translator. And my first response was like, oh my God, I'm Polish too, and I think I might be able to go to Krakow, but they weren't, you know, it wasn't the time to have a conversation with the cops. And he identified you in the photo, but he says now that he sees you in person, you're too old. You couldn't be that person, which was not very nice, I don't think. And the Polish man said also that I looked too nice and I wasn't the kind of person that would punch people in the face. So they drove me back to the metro and asked me where I was from, and I told the cop it was nice to meet him because I thought it was the most ridiculous thing to say. But then afterwards, it kind of like occurred to me that maybe that's like the karmic payback. I know it's not enough for a murder, but it's something. I mean, we try anyway. So yeah. Anyway, so it's good. It's really great to be here. So before I start, I'll tell you a little bit about what you're going to see. For the past 2.5 years, I've been working on a doctorate in media and art, and the project is way too much to go into detail about now, but I'm using Afro-Cuban ritual practices of putting people into states of trance, and then mixing that with theater and performance, and thinking about how actors go into character, and thinking that these two different ontological systems might have something to say to each other. So what you're going to see here is video that's very modified, you'll see, that from the plays, along with some interviews from the actors as well as ritual practitioners in these systems that have also been in a state of trance. And you'll hear that, and then I'll be talking over it, and yeah, and the rest you'll just have to decide for yourself. So anyway, thank you for coming. And I think you're right by the, I'll check your shirt, so if you don't mind, yes. All right. Oh, and can you get the lights?
Yeah, we get
Okay. Are they right here?
Yeah. And actually that additional button, right, and maybe even that lamp. Cool. Maybe you can do all the work. Thank you. See, yeah, there's a button down there. Great. Okay, so
there's one on the other side too.
it's all part of the show.
Alright, so yeah. Thanks. When I met her, it turned me inside out, like light was being pulled from a shadow, only they could never be separated. And I understood, but I couldn't put it into words then, that rebirth is not unusual, but something that happens every day, whenever elementals meet. That rebirth is the rule, not the exception. Dubek explained, so that feeling you get when you're lost watching waves, or feeling the rhythms of the breath of someone sleeping next to you, that feeling, the things that escape through the cracks that hold reality together. To me, art can never capture this. And bad art thinks it has captured this. And good art tries to capture this and fails. And my favorite, my very favorite, is when art captures that sense of the impossibility of the capture. Getting ready to go far away, the dog, spirited, inspired, a spirit dog, grabs broken things, things dotted with blood, and puts them into my pack. I don't need these things, I say. Ha-ha, ha-ha, says the dog. When you travel to homelands, the first thing you pack are those things of grieving. But they're broken, I say. They're not broken, they work, she says. They work like a charm. That song of the sea that sings to me, you will go into the world and you will fall through holes in the world and you will die, and so will everyone you love. You will lose your father and you will be the father or the mother or the lover that someone else will lose. And it will happen again and again and again. This makes most of you nervous, so you try to get numb or acquire things. But if all you acquire is attention to your breath, you will start to see and feel the orchestration under it all. And you will come to know the things that mermaids know. I showed my daughter pictures of the moon before she could even speak. When she saw it for real for the first time, she was riding on my shoulders, wiggling like crazy, and she said the word moon over and over. I heard about my love's New York for over a year, and when I saw it, through her eyes for the first time, that moon that existed only in my head became real, and we were walking on it. I am indebted to this sense of mystery, and the way to pay the debt is by waking up and falling asleep in that same sense of mystery, as if every place on earth is the fruition of a dream our ancestors had for us. Note to self, release new Afro-Cuban exercise video, Pilates of the Caribbean. Someone once told you something and it wasn't true, but you believed them. You can't believe the living, like you. They are always confused by all the mirrors. But when you remember the dead, you hear things. And when you listen, the dead tell us who and where we are, who and where we will be. And that's when we remember who and where we are now. Wake up in warm rain on a day when you are made of clay, just soft enough to be formed into the thing you have been becoming, almost ready to be put to the fire. There were lots of stars and I tried to follow them all, and I liked the sudden ones and the chaotic ones or the twinkling ones the best. And I was always trying to write my name and our stories on them in some secret place. But when I stopped following anything, I started to notice that they had been writing on me, writing a story on me, and it didn't burn me, but set me on fire. Not a sudden fire, nor chaotic, nor twinkling, but a soft and steady white light. Wild in the eyes, soft in the heart, we get born to tell each other stories. Too much city and there's too much information and not enough knowledge to funnel that information. Go back to the woods and remember what you were taught. Go back to the woods, listen, learn to listen to plants and stones. There never was a lack of knowledge. The very last thing my grandfather told my grandmother was the beginning of the love story that I would one day swim in. When it freezes and death is painting in mundane colors, death only has one idea. The body is a tired muscle and the mind a rusty machine. There's an old trick, older than money, where you can look into the center of things and say thank you, and it doesn't even have to be heartfelt. It will work no matter what. And that's when the things that are frozen start to melt, and the world you miss and love, that world, you find that it has been hiding, shy, because it is falling in love with you, waiting for the thank you that makes the mystery visible. The grief for the ones who came before, for the ones who left the weave of the fabric much too soon. It turns into an open heart that hears the love song of the dead for the living. Take care of each other, feed each other in dark times, and make more light. It seems as though everyone eventually starts to look a little bit like Leonard Cohen. The shore to the sea, oh, what you do to me. I love what you've done, what you're doing, and what you're going to do. And it doesn't matter if you don't believe me, just look at me. It's written all over me. Oh, what you do to me. In the shadow of the moon, I was thinking about the loss of our dogs, the dogs of our fathers, and forgetting that magic happens in the dark or in the light. In the light of the moon, old friends, they come back, from under the lip of the sea. I live in the shadow and under the light of the moon. There is always more that's hidden, and I always hear dogs barking, even if I can't see them. When gorgeous fairies come dancing on your doorstep, asking for a kiss before midnight, open the door. I'm talking to the moon on the night before the longest day of the year. It's been getting brighter and brighter for months, and this is just impossible. This has been wonderful and terrible, I say, because I want to be diplomatic with the moon, because the moon is moody sometimes. But can we have just a little more shadow? The moon is looking thoughtful, and the moon says, oh, by the way, this is in my head. It's not like a real voice. I mean, I'm not crazy. The moon says, yes, I think these things can be arranged. On the train, staring without getting caught, trying to find out if anyone here has a clue of what it was like to waltz before the war. Woke up fevered from this place, on the banks of where we go back to the place we were before. There's a holding area, everyone waits, and all of the things you lost in your life are brought back to you. The ones who are the most attached to things are the most sentimental, and they cry, not because they missed the things, but because they realize that someone or something was paying attention to their sadness after all. The ones who have lost touch, they cry too, not because of the things, but because their memories have come back to them, and they missed memory the most. And then there are ones who have stayed unattached, but still managed to stay in the world, all the way in the world, and they do not cry at all. They are not given anything back because they never lost anything, because they understand that they already have everything in the world they could possibly need. This year, the ending year, brought up old crimes, the oldest crimes, enough to stir the bones, the oldest bones, from the bottom of the ocean. And those bones, the oldest bones, float to the surface but can't keep us from drowning. They can't. But if we listen to those old bones, the oldest bones, they teach us how to swim. Grandparents, their children, and the children's children, all watching the waves, watching the bones rolling in the waves, and remembering, remembering, remembering. Now there are monsters. Now the children are seeing monsters, and the parents see themselves, and the grandparents just start weeping, weeping, weeping. Those monsters were supposed to be gone by the time the grandchildren came into the world, but here they are, they're right here, they're still right here. There is a terrible wind that won't stop, and we can't pretend that this is not history writing on our very bones. For every life stopped short, there is a frantic and furious love that is released into the world, that contains all the unfulfilled tenderness of the years that were supposed to be. Outrage is the response to the call of those love songs from the dead. We can't pretend our children didn't see this, but we have to act so their children don't. It will turn you inside out and make you want to open all the doors and windows and make you want to hide inside a cave outside a city, and it will break all of your mirrors and erase all of your memories, and it will haunt you in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, and it will stop your heart and shatter it, but there will come a day when love finally makes you calm. As long as you are able to fall in love with the theme that is your life, every variation is magic when it plays. Having chased a falling star was not enough. We eventually caught it and ate it, and we glowed from the eyes, and we glowed from our centers, and the price of eating a star was this: our hearts are softer, and we are prone to weeping and laughing. We give ourselves away, and we are not so very unique. Unimaginable beauty does not surprise us, every moment being inside a lunar cycle of constant revelation. Remember that feeling you had for the first time when you were riding in the car with your parents, going up north for the first time after a long summer, and you all stopped for gas, and when you got out of the car, the cool air and that smell hit you for the first time. And do you remember when it was Sunday, and it was August, and it was this morning, and you had that same feeling, and it wasn't for the first time, except it's always for the first time. And repetitions and reminders of the first time always feel like the first time, and maybe that means that this is really always the first time. This one here is always the first time. The sound of the storms and the smell of wet desert and wet pavement, it brings you back that time you were 16, standing in a parking lot with your friends, full of cigarettes and rereading Lambrusco, and you were anxious. Where would you be in a year from now? You don't know how this works. You are anxious. And you remember now like you remember then. Everything is about to change. But we need to watch out for each other, whoever is we. We are all children of water, and we need to watch each other's backs. You spend the first part of this thing trying to navigate a sea that you don't understand. And now, here, you don't know how this works, but you know that you aren't trying to find your way back home. You're aiming toward getting lost in the ocean and finding home there, or rather here, always right here. These two philosophical dogs standing on the edge of the sea, watching a storm coming in, and one says, this is all one version of reality that we can choose to accept or not accept, and we can decide not to play by the rules of this particular game. And the other one says, I think we will both be much more interesting in a few minutes when that version of reality is threatening to drown us. You're back in that city 20 years later. All of the traces of you are hard to find, but they're there. There are other versions of your circles in the cafes and the galleries and waiting on the corners. When you look for familiar things start to show traces, but this won't be easy. You have to decide which traces to follow, based on the ghosts that haunt you the most, or the gestures that feel incomplete. A love song from the dead to the living, and a love song from the living to the dead. Bright as three suns, dark as the other side of the moon. When I think of you, my heart beats faster. I'm sitting in the dark, where I can't tell the ghosts from the living, watching my dreams and feeling like I am witnessing something, not the beginning or the end of the world, but something far outside of that space where such things even matter. Some of us make art to bring light to hidden angles that make sense to us. And we want to be as specific as possible because someone else might one day say, that thing you saw, I've seen it too, I've been there too, and I felt the way you felt when you were there. Because this is either a dream or based on a dream that we had. And if we're living in it, then everything we ever wanted is not so far from reach. Love is standing perilously close to the edge of the world. Love is the breath between the moment and the narration of that moment. Love is a tea ceremony, a furry thing crawling in through the dog door, a cracked cup and a playlist of 80s famous hits. Love wakes you up or keeps you up or touches your forehead until you sleep, a dream and a grave and a story about me. A falling star when it's already sunrise, that splits open a rock like a knife made of lightning and gives birth to a snake born whispering two dead languages, where it could be brunch in a cafe with sesame in the name, and they only serve herbal tea and soy milk, and it would still be all right. And every time I walk into a room with her, I feel a little bit taller. Love's definitions keep adding to the story of the first love, the one where the star loved the idea of us so much it just exploded. Remember that. I mean, I remember that. I mean, that star remembers us. Now I remember something about the light here, the water so close here, and the almost rain here, that makes the line so thin, that line between life and poetry. I was talking to the rain, trying to explain that I understood why it falls, and still had no idea what it was doing to the earth beneath the surface. The heart isn't a mystery or a poem, just a warrior learning how and when to make a decision. The first thing that you need to know, it says, is that there are some who never leave the forest. Breast belt doggess tells the moon-struck dog, your eyes burst open with salt water because the sea is moving through you. Unclench your fists and unwrap your lips from your teeth. That music you are pretending not to hear, it's really playing and you're really hearing. These gifts you get when you come into the world. The eyes and the teeth and the bones and the hands and the smell of everything that you are. These things that you leave at the door on the way out of the world. And before all of these and after all of these, there is hearing and there is breath. And it's no wonder this life is a song. This love is a song. This dream was and is a song. 6 months after the storm, and the beach was still littered with so many of his things. Military jacket, a book on Gandhi, a cane he carved, a bird feeder. I started to loosen that cloak of grief. It won't come off all the way yet or ever. And I could see that I was changing. There were feathers sprouting from my chest. The same thing used to happen to him when he was happy. When she ordered a glass of salt water, I knew this was the beginning of a great adventure. God is the smile of that beggar, the shaking, anxious dog, the father who rocks you to sleep, the mother who puts you together and takes you apart, the breath that connects, the last breath, no breath, the whisper in the desert, and the teeth on the back of the neck that turns you into an object of desire. Those ghosts of winter come turning the desert back to sea, with all the kinds of mermaids, little goth girls and banshees included, angels of grief and hunger, all of them. Death runs in our bloodlines, and every death wakes up the old dead, who tell the living, there is not a single one of you who is not made up of drops of every single one of us. She lifts the lip of the river like it's a sheet, and I can see so many bones. I had no idea, so many bones. You only see this at certain times of year, and this time is about to close. Already there are more waves coming. They sound like music, and she can't hold the sheet much longer. Okay, I say, bring the music up. I've seen enough. Let the music swell. let the music swell. Everyone has a bird or two on their chest. Everyone has a bird or two in their chest, but almost everyone's afraid of flying. You'd have to give up seeing what you want to see and what you saw and trade for seeing what is right in front of you. You'd have to give up trying to be who you think they want you to be. You'd have to give up remembering only the things that happened to you in exchange for remembering what happened to all of us. You'd have to exchange your yeses and nos for perhaps. You'd have to give up all the things that you no longer need. When he looks at her, he is lost in blue, and is inside the storm at high tide, and as safe as a dog under a bed on a night of fireworks. I haven't thought about the Holy Grail since I was 17 years old, he says, since I stopped praying to things I couldn't see. Like on any lover's moon, I left my skin on the edge of the beach and went into the sea to change. When I came back, the 3 women were sewing the skin, and I thanked them for putting me back together. They said no, they weren't sewing me together. They were sewing that old skin shut. It hadn't fit for months, and I was getting too lazy to find my next face, and they were giving me no other choice. I am cleaning the table next to where Dad sleeps. There are a few teeth, old skin, and some feathers. Dad, I say, I totally forgot that you knew how to do that. He's starting to look over his shoulder, ready to leave, and he says, we have different gods, but they know a lot of the same secrets. There was that Father's Day where all the fathers, living and dead, got together to figure out which fears were really theirs and which ones were inherited from another time, from other fathers and other gods. And they found that none of those fears really belonged to them anymore. And they stopped arming themselves against enemies that existed only in their heads. And they stopped teaching their children to make themselves appear larger than they really were. And they stopped talking to the gods they didn't believe in. When they stopped talking, they started to hear things from the water, stories about what happens to children who are not afraid. And in this way, the fathers were remembered, put back together as something we all forgot they were, something extraordinary but forgotten, woven into their fabric from the very beginning. Even though she turns to salt as soon as he lifts his head from the pillow, he still talks to her. He hears her, and she hears him. So he says to the ground beneath his feet, yes, you're right. The air doesn't fall in love with the earth. They were always in love. There never was any falling. It was always like that. And it will always be just like that. Thanks.